Yeah, like your answer for everything is, Christiana, you just need to pray more, or you just gotta read more. And it's like, but there is a practical, real world solution to this.
That is a real world solution.
No, there's like, okay, if this is the issue, then there is a physical solution.
Okay.
It's not always a spiritual solution to physical problems.
All right, Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to Shabbat Conversations with the Avads. I am Shad.
I'm Chris.
All right, and so we have a new episode for you today. We're going to be talking about vulnerability. I saw this viral clip that Shaq did, I think it was maybe last week, a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about vulnerability in relationships. And his premise is that, you know, as a man, we should not be vulnerable to women because women are going to use your vulnerability against you and it's going to bite you. It's going to come back and bite you. So that was his premise. And he says to never be all the way vulnerable with a woman. Right. And I'm sure certain women have the same premise when it comes to men. Like, I'm not going to be all the way vulnerable. I'm not going to attach myself too much or give myself too much or be too emotional. That way he use it or she use it against me, right? So I just thought this was a good topic to go into because I know a lot of people have this mindset when it comes to vulnerability. I guess the first question to start it off, what does vulnerability look like to you?
You can start.
But actually, start.
You can start. I'll feed off you.
I'll start it off. All right. So the first question is, what does vulnerability look like to you or look like to me? So vulnerability, I believe, is being willing to express your authentic self to your spouse. I think in a nutshell, I think that's what it is. Being able and being willing to be transparent with your spouse. Not withholding things from your spouse. So, because I think a lot of times, you know, there's a lot of married people and people in relationships that like to withhold things from their spouse that they're ashamed of or that they feel like their spouse might use as a weapon against them, right? But I believe in being fully vulnerable. I believe it's important that you are fully vulnerable to your spouse. But for me, that's what vulnerability is being willing to be transparent, express yourself authentically, whether it's whatever emotion, raw emotions you have, whatever feelings you have, you're upfront with your feelings, you're upfront with your emotions, you're upfront with how you think. Right. So what about you?
Yeah, I think the biggest part is being transparent, like being able to discuss things that I guess are on your mind or things that bother you, things that are troubling you, things that you struggle with, being able to like be upfront about those things with your significant other. I think it's more so from the standpoint of I'm telling things about myself than me trying to always tell you things about yourself. So I think vulnerability is more so like expressing or telling the battles that you face on your own or within yourself. To me, when somebody say be vulnerable, it's exposing yourself.
Yeah.
Like taking this outer hard cover off and exposing either wounds that have not been healed or soft spots, stuff that like has not been fully addressed. Like I'm still dealing with this. It can still be affecting me on a daily basis. So I'm gonna allow myself to be vulnerable and put myself in a position that may come back to bite me.
Right.
But I'm willing to put myself in that position to be vulnerable.
So with that being said, just heat it up a little bit, make it more personal. Is vulnerability something that you struggle with, or you think that we're really good at that in our relationship? What you think as far as us vulnerability, vulnerable wise? What you think?
Now I'm better about it. I'm an open book as far as like sharing stuff, but in the beginning I was not.
Why you? How come? How come you wasn't?
I personally feel like you were very preachy in the beginning. So anything that I told you I was struggling with, or this was an inward battle, instead of you being comforting and like, obviously you don't need to pacify whatever. I'm not looking for you to pacify whatever it is I'm struggling with or challenging me.
Right.
But you were not necessarily a help all the time in the ways that I needed you to help. You just were like, oh, well, if this is the issue, then you got to do this, and this to get rid of it. And it's like, but I'm not necessarily going to you for solutions. I'm going to you because I need somebody to
you need somebody
to
understand and comfort you.
Yeah. So that was what. And so when I figured that out in the beginning, it made me retreat because I'm like, it's no point in me telling you because all you gotta do is like. I mean, it wasn't necessarily attacking, but it's like it wasn't helpful.
Yeah.
So it's like I might as well just keep it in because I'm not getting any help out of this.
But here I got a pushback though, and I get that, and I agree, and I think I've gotten a lot better at that over the years as far as picking my spots on when to critique, when it's time to critique, and when to comfort, when it's time to comfort. But I do think there's a balance to that, right? I do think there's times where I can, if there's something that I see that's lacking, I can point to whatever that's lacking. I can point to whatever it is that you can do to help you overcome whatever hurdle that you're going through. You know what I'm saying?
But most of the time I already know what to do. I'm just not in a position to want to do it yet.
But sometimes, don't you think sometimes you need encouragement sometimes? Like you know what to do, but sometimes when your faith kind of waver or you just kind of feel down, words of affirmation or encouragement can kind of help lift you up, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, sometimes I can.
But just not for me.
I just don't feel like you can understand it all the time.
But
you listen to respond, that's why.
But do you think that, do my solutions not be good though? Do what I say do it not make sense? But that's what I'm saying. If I give a solution, does it not make sense?
Sometimes your solution makes sense, but sometimes it's like that's like in an ideal world that would work, but that's not realistic.
Like what? Like certain things that you may feel is over spiritual.
Yeah, like your answer for everything is, Christiana, you just need to pray more. You just got to read more. And it's like, but there is a practical, real world solution to this.
That is a real world solution.
No, there's like, okay, if this is the issue, then there is a physical solution.
Okay.
It's not always a spiritual solution to physical problems. Like, obviously, you can always pray to read more.
We're going to disagree on that one.
Yeah, but
there's a spiritual solution to every physical problem.
Okay, so say if I'm taking a really hard class in school and I say, oh my goodness, like this class is so challenging, I cannot get this homework. And you say, Christiana, you just need to read and pray more. Well, no, I need to study too. So that's what I'm saying. Like, there is a physical component of that this class is challenging and I need to get a tutor. I need to order some additional resources, some books. There's a solution physically to something I can be doing in addition to me growing my faith. So I think you forget the physical solution sometimes. Yours is always like, dang, well, maybe you probably need to fast. I'm like, yeah, but I also...
Is fasting not
physical?
Yeah,
but me reading the Bible is not going to give me the answers to a calculus test. Yeah, but
that's because a calculus class is minute in the grand scheme of life.
Yeah, but it's still a struggle. Obviously, I'm not in calculus, but me in school is a struggle. So it's like
we'll have mundane struggles.
Yeah, I'm not asking God. Oh my gosh, I'm not. Yeah. It's everything is not deep, and I'm on my knees praying to ask for answers to the test. But
that's fair. There's certain things. There's certain things. I do agree. There's certain things that we should have common sense on and just act on. Like we should know God enough and understand Him enough to know what to just go forth and do and what to wait for, right? So I do think there's certain things that just common sense, right?
No,
it's just good. It's all good. But I still think, there's...
I mean, obviously we disagree. We've always disagreed on that. I'm a very practical, logical thinker, maybe to a fault, and you are very spiritual.
The physical and spiritual merge.
I agree,
and practicality is a big part of the Bible, so I'm not disagreeing. The practicality is important. It is important. I agree. But you gotta have the balance though. Like you can't, you
balance
can't
is
always
key.
poo-poo my critique.
I don't
sometimes
poo-poo your
you can sometimes listen to the critique
No.
and just what can I do to implement what
That's
Shy
fine. But your critiques are also sometimes just things that are not gonna help me today.
But you might not get a solution today. Your solution might not come when you ask for it. Might come when you need it.
I mean.
What?
Come next question.
What? For real. So I'll talk about my level of vulnerability. So I believe that it's getting better, like how you said, because I ain't gonna lie. Early on, I felt like you used my vulnerability against me. You know, as far as like maybe me being emotional at times, and then you'll come back and use that as like a weakness, or like bring up certain things as if it's a weakness, and so that makes me reluctant to open up, because I felt like at one point in time, you know, things were getting used against me. But I feel like now, you know, I have no problems with being open with about how I feel. Obviously, you talk about complaints, that's one thing, but just me being willing to share, be open to how I feel, what I'm struggling with, I have no problems with that, because I trust that, you know, you got my back and that you're not going to use my feelings, my intrinsic thoughts against me to go spread it or to demean me in any way, right? So I don't have any issues with vulnerability at this point. You know, I think that's something that we're pretty good at. I know we talked about our vulnerability level towards each other and how it's gotten a lot better. But how do you think your vulnerability level is just in general when dealing with people?
I'm an oversharer for the most part. To people I know.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to the point where I just, I guess, not necessarily cracked, but I got to the point where I was like, I can't keep holding stuff in, so I have to tell people what I'm going through.
Mm-hmm.
Or else I feel like I'm being fake. Like, if I'm around somebody but I'm not explaining to them, like, the things I'm struggling with, I feel like I'm putting up a facade. I would say I'm vulnerable. I mean, obviously, I've had to ask my friends what they thought, but I would think, just from the level that I share, that I'm an overall pretty vulnerable person. With my friends.
Mm-hmm.
I think my family's a different story.
That's understandable. What about, let's say, with random people you come in contact with, like maybe not a close friend, but coworker or someone that may be more of an acquaintance or even strangers? Do you have the ability to be vulnerable to people that you don't even know? Or do you find yourself holding back people like that?
I don't really...
Or you don't have really assessed that?
Yeah, I don't talk to people who are not my friends like that. So it's like, I guess I'm not vulnerable with them, but I'm not saying I'm not friendly, but if I work with you on a consistent basis, then I consider you like
some
friendly,
kind of
type of friend. Like, I'm not just working with people that I'm like, I don't ever talk to you ever.
Yeah.
So I only work with 2 people.
Yeah, I'm the complete opposite.
Yeah, you don't talk to me.
I struggle with vulnerability with friends, coworkers, strangers. It's a tough thing for me. Like, I could be very vulnerable with you, and I feel like I can be open with you and stuff. But man, when it comes to other people, I don't know what it is. But I think once again, I think it's a lot of it is trauma from childhood. Feeling like I've disappointed certain people here or there. Just a lot of internal family issues, I think, plays a part in my lack of vulnerability. But I think I'm doing a lot better. I'm getting there slowly, but surely I'm getting there. You know, the fact that I'm an educator and I have to deal with people on a daily basis, and you know, I have to, you know, really put myself out there. So so being in this field, I have to learn to put myself out there and make myself available, which to me is a form of vulnerability. What are some experiences, if you want to share, some experiences that makes you so comfortable with being vulnerable, or the lack thereof. When you share something of your upbringing that makes you feel so comfortable with being vulnerable.
Oh, you found it. I told you. I just remember probably in college, this is probably the most vulnerable, or like the first time I really allowed myself to be vulnerable with my friends. I was in, or a friend. This is when I was running track in college. And we had to come back early it was either Thanksgiving break. I think it was Thanksgiving break. The people who were traveling had to come back early over Thanksgiving break to practice. And so we were like the only people on campus, us and maybe the basketball team or something. We're like the only people on campus. And of course, there's nothing to do. The calf was closed because it was break and everything. And so at this point, it had to be Thanksgiving break because I was the new person on the team. And so I didn't have a lot of friends on the team. Most of my friends, because this was sophomore year of college, so most of my friends were people I had met freshman year who were not on campus because they didn't run track or whatever. So after practice, the coaches would give us dinner. We had to go get dinner or whatever. And I would just go back to my room. I was one of the only people on track team with a car, or in my sprint group with a car.
Right.
And so after they would give us food, I would go back to my room and just watch TV because I wasn't really like super cool with nobody on the team at this point or whatever. And so one of my friends is still one of my best friends today. We was leaving from dinner that night, and she was like, what are you doing after practice? Or whatever, like after we done? And I was like, going back to my room. And like we were cool, like we were cordial, we were talking talk in practice, but she was like the star of the team. So it was like and I was just a walk on. So it was like one of the different, to me in my mind, I'm like, this is the star of the team. She don't want to talk to me or whatever. And so, but she was nice. She never put off those vibes. But in my mind, it was just like, I think she only talked to me because we're in practice together or whatever. I never saw us like being best friends or anything. And so just randomly, that was like probably the longest that we had ever talked. Randomly, she asked me what I was doing after practice. And so we came back to the room. She came back to my room and we just kind of talked. And I like really told her some stuff I had never told anybody. Some stuff that I had been struggling with at the time that I had never told anybody. And she just happened to be struggling with the same thing. And so it was just like the realization that like out of me being vulnerable, I met somebody that we could help each other like grow through our struggles. And that was exactly what ended up happening. Like we ended up having weekly Bible studies together after that, and then we eventually over time just became best friends or whatever. And so it was just like out of that vulnerability, I saw what could flourish.
Out of being vulnerable.
Yeah, so I just saw what could flourish out of like vulnerability. And so all my friendships that I've had, it all comes to like this time where like we are friends, I would say surface level friends, and then something happens for us to like really share with each other, like be really vulnerable with each other, and that just always makes our relationship go way deeper than what it is. So I think that's one reason I freely share now, because I realize like other people are struggling with stuff, probably the same thing you're struggling with, especially if they're the same age. You tend to kind of go through the same stuff in life. But then it just, with vulnerability comes like honesty and like being trustworthy, and I think people really respect the ability for you to be vulnerable with them, because it like allows them to let their guard down, or it allows
it's a good relationship builder.
Yeah, it either allows them to let their guard down, or it allows them to be like, okay, I don't want to have to deal with XYZ, or I'm not to the point where I want to be vulnerable yet. So it kind of weeds out friends that aren't really friends, if that makes sense. Yeah. So it's just I guess a good judger of character.
What are some things that you experienced that?
Oh yeah, just like deeper friendships, more meaningful friendships. When I found myself being super vulnerable with my friends.
You saw the positive outcomes of being vulnerable. Yeah.
But I've also seen negative outcomes of being vulnerable.
And I think I was going to touch on that. I was going to touch on that aspect, and I think that's why a lot of people, including myself, struggle with vulnerability, because of the negative side of being vulnerable. Well, not being vulnerable, but the negative outcomes from being vulnerable. Because being vulnerable is a positive thing. You should always be vulnerable, even when it don't go your way. It's always good to be vulnerable, because at the end of the day, you can grow from being vulnerable, and you can help other people grow from being vulnerable, even if it don't go well for you. You see Yeshua, most vulnerable person on the face of the planet. And he got a lot of backlash. A lot of contention. A lot of people didn't like what he was, putting out, or his teaching, or his doctrine, or his level of understanding of the Torah. But he continued to be vulnerable regardless of the outcomes, and it ended up working out in his favor and for the world's favor, right? So it's always good and necessary to be vulnerable. But I think what keeps people from being vulnerable is, it can be trauma, or, like I said, negative outcomes from being vulnerable. For instance, I've had times in my life where, being vulnerable seemingly backfired, right? Where someone didn't treat you right for being vulnerable, or someone used your vulnerability as a weakness, or grow up, be tough, be strong. You can't be doing all this A, B, and C, and so you would get rhetoric like that, and it makes you build this hard outer shell because you keep getting rejected for being vulnerable, right? So I think those negative aspects keep people from being vulnerable. But even with all that, it's still important to be vulnerable. Like she said, being vulnerable is great when it comes to building relationships. Being vulnerable is great when it comes to growing spiritually, physically, mentally. Vulnerability is just great, because when you're vulnerable, you let your light radiate, and people can understand you better. They can empathize with you, sympathize with you. They can grow to understand you, and when somebody can grow to understand you, and you build a friendship, then people are willing to, like she said, to let their guard down, and you can have a flourishing relationship, right? So it's always good to be vulnerable, even when it doesn't go right. And a lot of times it might not go right. We live in a very harsh society, where people look at vulnerability as a weakness. So we have to understand that the positives far outweigh the negatives when it comes to being vulnerable. I don't want to preaching stuff, but just wanted to scripture that one of my favorite scriptures in the Brit Hadashah New Testament, 1 John, 1 Yochanan 9:10. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and righteous to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. If we say we do not sin, we make him a liar, and his word is not in us. Right? So being vulnerable helps you not only connect with God, but it helps you to be cleansed and to be used for his service. Okay? So it's necessary. It's very necessary. And last question, and we'll be get up out of here. So last question, right? Speaking about trust, can you trust someone completely if you're not all the way vulnerable with them? Like, is that complete trust, or you've made it when you're willing and able to be all the way vulnerable with someone?
I think your trust, it has a cap. Until you've been vulnerable with somebody, your trust
is gonna have a cap. It's not at 100%. It's like it's a cap to it. Yeah, I agree. Once again, vulnerability is important in a relationship, and it's hard to really know someone when you refuse to be vulnerable. It's like you got something that you're hiding, right? And that's suspicious. To me, that's suspicious behavior when you can't be vulnerable. So I feel like you can't be 100% trustworthy if you're not willing to be 100% vulnerable. Right?
You're not going to know nobody 100% even the day that you die.
That's also true.
You're not going to know nobody 100%. But it's to the point of like, it's a difference between that topic just never came up, or like I've suppressed that trauma that I just don't talk about it.
Right.
And like me blatantly not trying to expose stuff. Like I'm blatantly hiding things about myself.
Yeah, because
things
of shame, because of doubt,
like
because
there.
of guilt.
Yeah. I think that's a difference.
Yeah, like blatant. Because like I said, sometimes we suppress stuff we don't realize we're suppressing it.
Yeah, we don't realize we're suppressing it. So I'm like, it never came up. It might be 15 years into y'all relationship and something happens that triggers a feeling or triggers an emotion. It's like, well, I never said this because I have not thought about it in 15 years. But if it's something that you struggle with on a daily basis and you just are intentionally not having that conversation with your significant other, I think that's blatant. Not say that the person is evil or conniving for not bringing it up. Yeah. It could just be something that has a stronghold on them. But I think it is hard to like 100% trust somebody when you have not seen them in all capacities. Yeah. Or you don't know 100% what they're capable of.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So yeah, I mean, it's gonna have to. You're gonna have to let your guard down and at least give the other person the ability to respond to your vulnerability. I think a lot of times, like say, we were so scared to be vulnerable because we're scared of the reaction because we're used to getting maybe negative reactions. So I'm gonna hold it in because I've been in relationships or I've had parents, or I've had this, and this, and they've treated me like this when I gave myself. So now, nope, I'm a tuck it in. I ain't gonna let it go.
Yeah, I saw this video and it's talking about how in relationships people like to play God because they take away when you're not vulnerable with somebody or like upfront and honest with somebody about everything. It takes away the other person's free will. So I have to put everything on the table for you to see, and then leave it up to you to want to deal with it or not. But when you don't reveal yourself 100%, you take away that person's ability to choose to deal with it because they don't know about it. So it's like you trying to play the role of God and take away somebody's free will. Mama.
That's a bar. That's a good point. And that's the one thing we gotta understand. That's one thing we gotta understand is that in life we can't control other people, but we can control what we do. That's the thing we gotta understand. We can control what we do. We can't control other people, right? So before we get out of here, just quick little thing before I end. Ladies, fellas, if you're in relationships, in a marriage, please do not weaponize somebody's vulnerability. Please, I'm begging you. You're gonna make a relationship, make the marriage, make whatever it is 10 times tougher, and the trust is gonna be that much harder to gain that person's trust if you weaponize their vulnerability. That's the worst thing you can do is weaponize somebody's vulnerability because they're being transparent. They're being upfront. They're being transparent. They're being upfront. They're trying to open themselves up in ways that they may not want to open up to anybody else because they're trying to, know you more. They're trying to, love on you. But then when you hit them with the negative stuff and you weaponize it, it's hard to get them to open back up, right? So try not to weaponize vulnerability. That's to anybody out there that's dealing with friendships, relationships, whatever it is. Do not weaponize people's vulnerability because it makes you hard to trust. The word tells us to seek the Most High. That if we seek with our heart, mind, and soul, that we will find them, right? So vulnerability is a necessary part of life because it helps us to grow and it helps us to be able to build relationships the way other people can grow, right? So is there anything else you want to add before we get out of here? All right, so this has been Shabbat Conversations with the Avads. It's been a really good episode. I enjoyed it. So like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with people. Get this out there. We want people to tune in. And if you have any suggestions on what you want to hear next, just put it in the live chat or put it in the comments, or DM us on Instagram or Facebook, whatever. And we'll listen to any other suggestions. So we thank y'all. We appreciate y'all. And shalom. Right. If you're of the opposite sex, right, you're with somebody long enough, somebody, it might not be both at the same time, but somebody is going to feel some kind of feelings at some point.
But I don't feel like he does not believe that you can be. Is it platonic? He doesn't feel like.